All right, so I'm going to try to do a bit of a different presentation today. I'm going to go out on a limb, so if it doesn't work, don't blame me, blame the gods of the live demos. But let me start with a question. How many of you made a financial decision today? Like it's 3:30, right? 4 p.m. I would be surprised if not everyone raises their hand, right? It doesn't have to be I bought a house. It can be I traded a stock. It can be I decided to go on public transport instead of in my car. Anything is, at the end of the day, a financial decision of sorts, right? So some of you may be wondering, why does Moody's have to do with embodied AI, and what are they doing? First of all, it's not just about a rating agency, which most people know us for, right? Rating bonds, rating governments, and so on. Don't look at me, I don't work on that part of the company. But it's also the other 50% of the company, which is doing stuff with that data. And we have heap lots of data from more than 550 million companies with their financials, their information, adverse media on them, all the way to the composition of the soil of your house, so that insurance companies can build models to calculate your premiums and everything in between. So as you can imagine, that is the paradise of a data scientist, such as myself. And obviously, we've been doing AI for quite a long time, but when generative AI came in, we really saw a potential make or break on our business, which is about making decisions, either risk decisions or simply helping people with their financial and risk-oriented decisions on their daily lives. And sure, we all knew the risks and the limitations. We all knew about the hallucinations. So like many other companies, the very first thing that we did when ChatGPT came out was blocking it. But also, as I mentioned before, we put together this sort of sandbox that was ring-fenced and safeguarded for everyone to be able to understand that technology. I was leading that team of data scientists in the basement doing those use cases. But as it happens, I am not a banker. I'm not an insurer, an underwriter, so I knew nothing about how those processes went. I needed to do extensive education to people and tell them, hey, there's actually ways of reduce extensively the hallucinations, things like retrieval augmented generation. I know many of you know about this. But how can we use these techniques and more advances that came right after 2023 and during this year to get deep insights into what we're doing? So all that led us to what we call the next generation. Sure, we've been doing question and answering for a long time, and that's been great. We've been, from asking our boss to create an email to get on holidays tomorrow, all the way to generate a full credit memo. But that is only the first stage. So we like to work in this kind of stages of maturity on AI, and I'm going to get into the embodied part in a second. So the first one is assisted intelligence, right? That is us using Anthropic, ChatGPT, any of these systems. But they by themselves can do well for synthesizing data, summarizing stuff, but that's about it. And you cannot trust most of what comes out of that, specifically in regulated industries, talking about regulators and so on. It is when you go into augmented intelligence, when you add the context and the systems can assess the implications of what is around it. And I know we've been talking about this for automotive and so on, self-driving and whatnot. On our side, on making financial decisions, on the EU AI Act is also really relevant. Do we want to make a specific credit assessment of a company or an individual based on things that we cannot trust or that are a black box? So how do you add that context that in turn is based on stimuli, but the stimuli can also be real-time data from any of your different systems? Now, when we wanted to go to stage 3, we wanted to see how do we add that specific context. And I know some people started thinking about, now you have sunglasses with cameras and microphones. And we did a little experiment where I remember this was a year ago. I was holding a newspaper, and there was some piece of news from NVIDIA. It was on one of those deeps that they had in early 2024. And the system would go into Moody's data sets, into the financials, into the ratings, and will give me the other side of the story that the paper was not giving me at that time, right? So we started playing with that idea and thinking, what if, for us, embodied AI is about using the human as the augmented entity that can get a much longer memory, many more capabilities, and many more skills that none of our analysts, no matter how smart they are, none of our economists can go that far. But how that would look like. And that is what we call the stage 4, right? When sort of instead of giving a question to the system, we give them a challenge. We give them a problem. And then we thought, what if we get one of our smart economists, one of these people that are really good at analyzing risk and so on, and we use them as the baseline to train the models. Kind of like what we were saying on self-driving, in the same way that we use tons of video footage to train our driving models, why don't we do the same thing with these credit risk models? And that's effectively what we've been doing, and creating what we call a swarm of agents, a collection of agents, an army, doesn't matter how you call them, and that's why I wear this t-shirt today, where instead of asking for a question, and the system, the assistant, the agent, the Q&A, ChatGPT, is just a thing that helps you do better, and don't get me wrong, you can go very far with that. It's a system that you basically give it an objective. It can be something like, I want to have a system that puts a video camera in my house and tells me when there is an intruder. Why cannot I have a dedicated ad hoc software that does that and something builds it for me instantly? For me. By the way, this is a real case, a real example that I did in 30 minutes just last week. So these agents that have memory, have some prior knowledge, skills, like our economists, and some tools. Tools can be your LiDAR sensors, can be your cameras, your thermal cameras, or can be weather APIs, information about stocks. It can be 120 years of ratings and research information that we own. All those 550 million companies and their financials. So these agents would use these resources and will build new knowledge. The before was, I'm going to go into our own knowledge and we'll replicate it. The after is that we create net new insights and net new information where there is early warning signals that no one thought of, or any other system like that. And then the agent, this kind of project manager on steroids, would give me back a plan. I would approve the plan, or not. Maybe I want to make some changes. But when I approve it, it will take all that together and will call his friends, or its friends, probably better said. And it would delegate work. Now, some of these friends may be software developers, some of those may be economists, maybe rating analysts, news analysts, would be data scientists, maybe QA people for testing everything. And then they would execute the tasks. Once they're done, they would ask for an evaluation, they would do another set of tests, and then they would provide me a final output, would deliver a final output. So effectively, you can imagine that you can do that for almost any type of intelligent investigative work. And it's not about replacing current processes. It's about, imagine the collection of analysts that follow any public company in the US, for example. How many analysts from Bloomberg to Morningstar and so on following Tesla or Moody or any other public company? They know everything that has to be known about these companies, right? But can you do that with a small company with maybe a market cap of $20 million? Of course not. There's not enough analysts in the world, in the solar system, probably. What if we can use these things to create ESG ratings, cybersecurity ratings, to create net new information based on the same principles, and analyze those smaller companies and their early warning signals with exactly the same principles and the same depth that we analyze a Fortune 500. Same goes for portfolio analysis, obviously very specific financial cases, but if we also add our own quantitative models, the tried and true models that have passed the governance, can we give those models to the agents so that they execute them in a way that when I go to the regulators, I can say, look, we run these models, and they were approved, and they're transparent, and they're explainable, and they're interpretable. So now we can go and see which tools the agents actually use. So all this is, in my opinion, the future of finance and many other industries, but it's how we augment people in the companies and how we put these type of systems right next to you when you're doing your analysis in a company, when you're on a board meeting where you're trying to make a very high capital decision or in an investment and trying to decide that. So imagine that as a little swarm where these guys, these things, take specific roles. And then inside each of those little robots, you have maybe 5, 10, hundreds of them. And now imagine you can simulate that. So we did another experiment some time ago, and we wanted to get agents to impersonate the presidential candidates in the US. And we get them to debate. We gave them as much information as we could. Of course, we're not in the minds of the back then candidates. And we simulated the potential outcomes of the debate, right? But we didn't do it once. We did it 1,000 times. And we could build a probability distribution of what the outcomes could be. Spoiler alert, the outcome was not good. Because most of the foundational models are trained to be extremely agreeable. So it was really fun to see the candidates really agreeing on everything and being super close friends. But because this is quite abstract and difficult to understand, we decided to build a little game. Now people in my company say that I spend all day playing video games, which may be true. But we decided to build a little demonstrator or an experiment. This is not a product, not something that we're putting in the market. But it shows something that if I wanted to demonstrate how these things work, connecting to the different skills, connecting to the different sensors, all that you would see is a blank screen, a dark screen with a lot of text moving. Right? And everything is about, if you make decisions by thinking about that, effectively generating tokens in your brain, can you replicate that? So we built a slow representation of that, and hopefully this works. Give me a second. Now we switch. This is probably one of the most strange presentations you've seen in a while. You need to switch on the laptop. They want to get rid of. There you go. There you go. Hello? There's a little bit of delay. I'm choosing the agents. And now these guys are here to help me. I'm going to ask them a question. Hi, can you give me the 5 companies with the highest movement in the stock market today? All right, let me try again. Where are my agents? I've done this presentation like 10 times. It worked 90% of the times. Oh boy. I'm going to try one last time and then I will explain it. For some reason, you can observe the agents at the beginning here, right? Are they here? Oh, there you go. Hold on. One last try. Thank you. So I have a moderator, I have an economist, a news analyst. Let's see if the third time is the charm. Can you give me 5 blue chip companies in the US that could be a good investment today? You see this guy is thinking now. And now this one is also thinking. First time it takes a little bit of time, depending on the Wi-Fi. No spoilers. So effectively, they are now going to the different tools that Moody's has, and they will provide me an assessment on the answer. So this is supposed to be telling me something now. This is the answer. Now they would be speaking about this. And what you would see is, if this were to work, so unfortunately this is playing up. I was trying, when you were having lunch, this was working, I promise you. Again, it's a prototype, so my apologies about that. But what you would see is each of the agents would come out with their own opinions and their own thoughts, and then they would disagree with each other. So you would have a corporate investor, and they would say, well, based on the latest rating, based on the revenue, I would say that maybe Coca-Cola is a good investment today. And then the researcher will come and will say, well, but hold on. According to the market today, maybe that's not a good idea. So each of the agents has their own sort of agency that we have programmed, of course. So it's about how do you bake those things into the system. And the output can be a portfolio, can be an investment strategy, can be a memo, can be a report of any kind. And this thing works at light speed under the hood. So with this, when it works, we hope to show people kind of the power of this embodiment. And then you can imagine that you're on a board meeting and you have a couple of these agents just listening in. And when you're talking and saying something, one of them may say, hold on a minute, have you considered the latest thing that is happening here and there, and that may change your priors on that decision? Kind of having a Jiminy Cricket that knows more and goes deeper on all your decisions. So thank you very much. I'm sorry it didn't help, it didn't work, but